Independence Day, 1996. In the beginning of filming, filmmakers had the full cooperation of the U.S. military. What caused the military to pull their support of this movie? Independence Day holds a world record that may never be broken. What record is that? How did Roland Emmerich get the idea for Independence Day? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
Good morning. In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world, and you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind. That word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interests. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. And the crowd cheers. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 226th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that brave Marine fighter pilot, that software engineer, and that young, charismatic president about Back Look Cinema. I hope that you've enjoyed your 4th of July weekend. It's filled with traditions like cookouts, fireworks, family gatherings, and for some of us, a viewing of Independence Day, the movie. How do you normally spend your Independence Day? What do you do? What are your traditions? Or do you even celebrate this American holiday? I remember watching this in theaters in opening day and being totally blown away by the experience. This movie represents pure nostalgia for me, and it reminds me of simpler and happier times. What I get out of watching it is an infusion of that can-do spirit. It is as refreshing as a cold Coca-Cola on a hot summer day. Let's go back to that bygone era where aliens challenged humanity and lost. Let's go to the opening credits of Independence Day, 1996. Stephen Miller wants to be an astronaut. Thomas Whitmore wants to be taken seriously as president. David Levinson had never given up hope of getting back with his ex-wife. Various people of vastly different backgrounds and ambitions go about their daily lives when, one day, the whole world is interrupted when humanity wakes up to find enormous spacecrafts hovering over them. The perspective of the entire planet is changed forever, and the human race must wage the most important war since the beginning of the history of the earth. Independence Day was released July 3rd, 1996 by 20th Century Fox and Centropolis Entertainment. It grossed over $306 million in the U.S. and Canada and over $817 million worldwide on a reported budget of $75 million. That's the highest grossing film of 1996 and the second highest grossing film ever at that time, behind Jurassic Park. Now, what does that mean for today? What did those numbers look like today if it were adjusted for inflation? That would mean that it would have grossed $653 million domestically and $1.7 billion worldwide. And its budget would have been $160 million. So, financially speaking, that is a fantastic return on investment. And in my humble opinion, it earned every single dollar. It's just a fantastic film. And this is just the box office, not counting like DVD sales and all that kind of stuff. And the merchandise, I'm sure it made a continuous amount of money. Just now, I spent money to watch the digital version. It's still making money to this day. This film stars Will Smith as Captain Stephen Eagle Miller. You might have seen him in Men in Black, I Am Legend, Bad Boys, King Richard, or the live-action Aladdin of 2019. Now, I've known Will Smith is going through a moment right now. He kind of interrupted his career over his at the time that he won his first and only Oscar, and probably won't win another one. These actions have repercussions, but he's always been one of my favorite entertainers. Like from the beginning of his rap career, he was the artist that actually really gotten me into rap music. It's one of my favorite genres of music. And then moved on to acting with his TV sitcom, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where you get to see him grow as an actor and you get to see him develop his range. And then he continued that work when he moved on to motion pictures. And he's just been a joy to watch, especially on film. And it's like this movie really displayed just how exciting and charismatic that he could be as an actor. And this is still one of his best roles. He's arguably done some better roles, but I really enjoyed him in this movie. Then you have Bill Pullman, who played President Thomas J. Whitmore. And most famously, he's been in Spaceballs, but he's also been in Lost Highway. And I didn't realize it, but he's also in The Equalizer. I think I need to rewatch that movie just so I could see what part he played in that movie. I don't know how big of a part it was, but I was surprised to see he was in that one. And he's also been in LBJ. Then there's Jeff Goldblum. He played David Levinson. And you might have seen him in The Fly, The Grand Budapest Hotel, or Jurassic Park. And I've talked about some of those movies in previous episodes. Mary McDonnell played First Lady Marilyn Whitmore, and you might have seen her in Donnie Darko, Dances with Wolves, or Sneakers. But I know her primarily as the president in Battlestar Galactica, the remake or the reboot. And that was fantastic. Judd Hirsch played Julian Levinson. And he was in The Fabelmans and A Beautiful Mind and The Muppets. And the thing about Judd Hirsch is that when I watched this movie and I seen him, I recognized him from when he was on Taxi. And because a lot of these, the actors that were used in this film, they were TV stars. And so when I saw him, I was like, yeah, it's a guy from Taxi. Robert Loggia played General William Gray. And you might have seen him in Big, Lost Highway, or Scarface. And I remember talking about him and being and we talked about Scarface in a previous episode. Now, I remember him being in that movie. And I'm not going to go over all of the actors and some of their previous works and this as we go over these opening credits, at least not this time, because this is a huge cast. It's an all-star ensemble, and it's just fascinating to see how many recognizable faces participated in this film. So going down the list, we have Randy Quaid as Russell Case, Margaret Colin as the White House Communications Director Constance Spano, James Rebhorn as Secretary of Defense Albert Nimzicki, Harvey Fierstein as Marty Gilbert, Adam Baldwin as Major Stephen Mitchell, Brett Spiner as Dr. Brackish Olkin. Brett Spiner, I remember from Star Trek. James Duvall as Miguel Case, Vivica A. Fox as Jasmine Dubrow, and finally, I want to do a special shout out to Robert Pine. He's not a major figure in this movie. He was killed off very early. He plays the White House Chief of Staff. He wasn't even given a name, but it was distracting when I saw him because for two reasons, especially in this viewing. For the first reason is because this is another TV figure. I remember he was I guess you call him a police captain for the show CHIPS. CHIPS it stands for California Highway Patrol. And there was a TV show called CHIPS. And it's famous for, what are the names? I forgot the stars. Eric Estrada was one of the stars of the show. And I can't remember the other guy's name. And it's not, I will never remember the other guy's name. The guy with the blonde hair. Never remember his name, but Eric Estrada played Ponce, and everybody wanted to be as cool as Ponce, riding a motorcycle and keeping the driving public safe in California. That was one of the coolest shows I watched when I was growing up. And Robert Pine played the police captain on that show. And he's also distracting in this movie because he was like taking me out of the story because I'm remembering that Robert Pine is Chris Pine's father. And had I never been told that fact, I probably would not have been distracted. Because one of the things I'm doing is I'm looking at Robert Pine's face and I'm trying to see Chris Pine's features in that face. But I don't know if I was overly successful. Perhaps they have the same eyes. But in any case, let me go ahead and move right along to tell you that this movie was directed by Roland Emmerich, the celebrated director. I have to say that this is probably still his best movie. Of all the movies that he's done, there are some movies that have come close, especially movies like Universal Soldier or Stargate or White House Down. But for the most part, his movies, like the 4th of July or Independence Day, has set such a high bar that in many of his movies, they feel, especially the movies after this one, they kind of fall short. So like The Patriot, actually The Patriot was pretty good. So I would say The Patriot is probably one of his better films. But like Godzilla from 1998 or The Day After Tomorrow and some other films that he made, they kind of fall short of what we know that he's capable of doing. And I think part of the reason is that in this movie, there are lots of plot holes. There are minor plot holes. There are major plot holes. But I think that the character development and the overall story, they come with such emotion that you kind of ignore some of the plot elements that don't make any sense. It's like, and it has such a pace to it that it's going too fast for you to think about some of the plot holes. It's one of those things where you don't think about the plot holes until the movie is over and you start asking questions like, well, why did this happen? Or why did they do it this way? Or how is what they did in that movie even possible? But then in some of his other movies, the plot, it's like it's like if you keep doing that, if you keep making movies and you keep ignoring these plot holes, then I think after a while the viewing public kind of gets tired of it. It's like we can see it now. You can stop doing it. We can see your plot holes. You need to start fixing these stories so that they make more sense. Or in some cases, like in cases of Godzilla, they're reimagining the whole concept of what a kaiju is. And me personally, being a Godzilla fan, I didn't appreciate that reimagination. Like, if they had made a monster movie and it was their own monster, then it would have been a great movie. But because it was Godzilla specifically, then some of the changes that they made didn't make any sense. And eventually, Toho, the studio, kind of disavowed this version of Godzilla in their own special way. But moving right along, this movie was written by Dean Delvin and Roland Emmerich. And as a team, they wrote Universal Soldier, Stargate, and Godzilla. Devlin by himself did a lot of TV work. And the only film outside of his partnership with Roland Emmerich is a film called Geostorm. Emmerich, for his part, wrote The Day After Tomorrow, 10,000 BC, 2012, and Moonfall. And I think he directed these too. And these are like 10,000 BC, 2012, and Moonfall. These are other examples of movies that just don't meet the moment. Especially Moonfall. Like, I thought that, I went to see Moonfall, and I thought that was going to be like a reinvention of his filmmaking style. Like, he had a come to Jesus moment, and he was going to make a film with a story that made sense. And as it turns out, Emmerich has not learned his lesson. This movie makes even less sense and has less logic than all of his other movies combined. So that actually, I hadn't seen 10,000 BC, so I'm not sure about that one. Maybe that makes even less sense. But for the most part, it's watching Moonfall is kind of like watching nonsense. Devlin and Emmerich got the idea for Independence Day while on a press tour in Europe promoting Stargate. A reporter asked Emmerich why he would make such a movie like Stargate if he didn't believe in aliens. Emmerich responded that he was still fascinated by the idea of aliens coming to Earth and asked the reporter to imagine what it would be like to wake up one morning to find 15-mile-wide spaceships hovering over the world's largest cities. To Devlin, he said, quote, "I think I have an idea for our next movie," end quote. The idea for a massive alien attack came out because it seemed to them that recent alien invasion movies dealt with aliens hiding on a farm for years or injecting unsuspecting humans before beginning a stealthy invasion. They considered that aliens traveling thousands of light years to reach Earth are more likely to make a grand impressive entrance to our planet before engaging in a massive attack to start the process of world domination. This movie was composed by David Arnold, and he's also written the themes for Casino Royale and some other James Bond movies, Godzilla from 1998, Changing Lanes, The Musketeer, The Devil's Own. I don't think I've heard any of the other ones. Well, I've seen Casino Royale or Godzilla. I don't have any memory of those, but this is a fantastic work he did on Independence Day. I was listening to the soundtrack as I was doing the notes, and yeah, this is just a really good, feel-good soundtrack. Well, composition, a musical score, and it's just fantastic. And speaking of soundtrack, I wanted to highlight a couple of songs from this movie, especially for how they were used in the film. The first one is "It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine" by REM and written by Bill Berry. And so that's a fantastic song, and it's even more fantastic for when they use it. It's like a great needle drop, one of the all-time great needle drops in film history. And the other is "Rumble" by Link Ray, written by Link Ray and Milt Grant. And this is also a song that was used to great effect, and it's kind of used as like the theme song for a down on his luck drunk. A down on his luck drunk that has told people that he was abducted by aliens and nobody believes him. A down on his luck drunk that was crop dusting but dusted the wrong field. It was great in its use. Now, those were the opening credits. Let's talk about our favorite parts. On July 27, 2004, then Illinois State Senator Barack Obama delivered a keynote speech to the Democratic National Convention in Boston called Audacity of Hope. That was a speech that gave us the effect of feeling hopeful for the future, of looking at the things that America had done and what America could do for its people, and the hope that America could accomplish these things for its people, and that the people of America could be greater. And American civil rights leader, Reverend Jesse Jackson, had a famous slogan, "Keep hope alive." And this preceded Barack Obama's message on hope. Hope is the main thrust in this movie, in which we don't just hope that humanity successfully defeats the aliens trying to conquer Earth, but we also hope that Captain Stephen Miller finds his girlfriend alive, that David Levison is able to rekindle the relationship with his ex-wife, that the president is able to both lead his country to victory and find his first lady has survived the chaos. What's great about this movie is that it succeeds in both the overall spectacle and the portrayal of the struggles that the main characters have to overcome. So good is this portrayal that we could not collectively care less about the gaping plot holes. So this movie, in the same way that some politicians have, they try to infuse us with hope. I think this movie does the same thing with hope, endurance, perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. It's encouraging us to move on. It's the type of the speech that the president gives on the dawn before the battle is like the type of speech that a coach is going to give his football team. This whole movie has an inspiring effect, and I feel that's the main theme. One of my favorite parts of this movie is the use of the song, "It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine." I mentioned that earlier. It's, I said, it's one of the world's greatest needle drop. It's a diegetic music. It plays near the beginning of the movie. When you go into the movie, you know that it's going to be an alien invasion movie. You know it's going to be humanity fighting aliens and basically fighting off annihilation. And so having the movie begin with these kids listening to "It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine," I think that's so perfect. It works incredibly well. One of the reasons that it's successful is that it kind of uses real science and it kind of mixes it up with fantasy pretty good. So one of the real things that, well, it's real-ish. It looks real to me. So there's a scientist and he's listening on the radio and he hears this particular noise on the radio and he gets excited about it and he calls his colleague. He wakes him up. It's like, "You got to hear this." He plays this noise over the phone and then his colleague is like, "Oh my God." Then he has to rush to the I guess it's a laboratory or it's a satellite relay. He rushes to that building from his home so that he could be there firsthand to analyze this noise. And the thing about it is that to the audience, it's just noise. Like it just sounds like radio static, but it means everything in the world to these people in this film. And I think that's one of the things I like about it, because in a way, it keeps the audience off balance. Like, we know that the character is excited, and we're kind of wondering what they're excited about. It's like, what is this noise? What does it mean? And it's this ambiguity that kind of starts the film off. It's setting the audience up for something greater to happen. And I think I really enjoyed that. It also, that they included an element of the story that the audience cannot understand. Like, there are probably people in the scientific community that would probably say, well, this is just nonsense, or this is just noise, or this isn't realistic. It might even be a hidden joke that they can decipher. But for the general audience, it's just noise. It just sounds like radio static. But I really like this ambiguity, this setup for something that's coming greater. Like, the audience, we already know what this movie is about. It's like we saw it on the TV commercials. They show the fights on TV, so we know why we're going there. But this slow build up to that fight that we saw in the trailer it's done masterfully. They kind of continued this trend when, like, they get, I guess it's a radio satellite picture of this thing that they can see in space, and they're describing how big it is. Like, oh, it's it's a quarter the size of the moon, and it's so massive, and we know that it's not a natural object because it's slowing down, which is something that natural objects don't do. And they show this weird image, and it's not something that the audience can decipher. It just looks like blobs of light in a black background. They just look like light blobs. It don't really hold any meaning for the people who are watching it in the movie audience, but the characters in the movie, they're looking at it and they're fascinated by it, because it's not really a photograph as you would think a photograph would look like. It's more like, kind of like what a ultrasound would look like. But you can clearly see the fetus in the ultrasound. Like, when you look at it, you can tell what it is. But in this photograph in the movie, or in this image in the movie, you can't decipher what it is. It holds all the meaning to the world for the people who are looking at it, but the movie audience cannot figure it out. And what I love about that is that it continues this ambiguity of the people on film understanding what's going on. The audience needs to be brought along. It needs to be pulled along to something greater. And it gives it a sense of realism, because they're showing us something that we can't decipher. It's giving us a sense of realism that is probably unusual for a film of this nature. Something it's not exactly a campy film, but it's not a film where you're supposed to be having, like, heavy thoughts about the plot. Like, this is not going to be a movie, a thinking man's or a thinking woman's movie. This is going to be a movie where you can really check your brains out the door. And then another thing that I like is, one of the main settings is the White House and basically the presidential administration. And you have the troubled presidency, as the president is basically fighting for legitimacy. Like, he's able to win the election, but can he get the people to go along with his policy proposals or whatever the things that presidents have to worry about? So President Whitmore is concerned with those things. And I like Bill Pullman's portrayal of the troubled president. And that was another thing that really pulled me into the movie. It was a fantastic, it's one of Bill Pullman's best work, I guess. But admittedly, I had not seen a whole bunch of movies or TV shows starring Bill Pullman. Another thing that this movie does extremely well is the scale of the UFOs. Like, Roland Emmerich talked about making a 15-mile wide UFO, and you can really sense the scale of these objects. Like, they did a fantastic job. Like, something as big as like 15 miles wide. That is something where you can see the front of it clearly, but then it just seems to go on forever. It just like fades into the background. And even like when these objects are entering Earth's atmosphere, like something that big pushing through the atmosphere is going to create atmospheric disturbances. So it's like a ball of fire coming into the Earth. And then when they finally get there, it's just like a wall of metal and whatever substances that create the structure of this enormous spacecraft. And that was one of the reasons that Jurassic Park was such a successful movie, is that Steven Spielberg knew how to create the sense of scale for the dinosaurs. Basically, the camera angles, how the dinosaurs were shot, at the very aspect ratio of the movie helped present the dinosaurs in an impressive light. So in the same way, and I don't know what they did technically, what Roland Emmerich did technically to give us a sense of scale. But the end result is that it is incredibly impressive. This is not something that we've seen in film before. Like, we've seen large spaceships, but we've never seen anything of this scale, especially in the planet. Like, we've seen large spaceships out in space, but when they're out in space, there's really nothing to compare them to. I think the largest thing that we've seen is like the Death Star. But we see that in comparison to what? Like, we don't really get a full sense of scale. But in this movie, we get that. Because one of the reasons we get it is because it's the spaceships are in the atmosphere. So the atmosphere itself, it gives the impression that the spaceships are fading into forever. Another great Easter egg that they put in the movie was one of the characters was watching The Day the Earth Stood Still. Either they were watching it or it just so happened to be on TV. And it's kind of a Easter egg of what we know is going to be coming to this movie. This movie is going to be about an alien attack, and so they show the old black and white movie as a precursor to what we are expecting in this modern movie. So I thought that was clever. Also, it was around this scene where a son calls his father an idiot. His father's a drunk, and his father had crop dusted the wrong field. His father being Russell Case, played by Randy Quaid to great effect. He was one of the better characters in this film. He was fantastic as as a drunk who had told his friends that he had been abducted by aliens, and they examined him sexually. And so when that part, I always think of this when I see this, when this comes up, is that I would get murdered if I called my parents an idiot. At least that would, if I were like a teenager. It's not something that would have happened. Another thing that I really liked about it is the very structure of the story. The movie is divided into chapters, and the chapters are the days that lead up to the final battle. So the first chapter is July 2nd. And on July 2nd, an extra-terrestrial mothership enters Earth orbit. This is the thing that's about a quarter the size of the moon. And then the spaceship kind of breaks off into different pieces of itself. And each piece is 15 miles wide. These flying saucers, 15 miles in diameter. And they move over the major cities. This all happens on that first day. One of the Easter eggs that they use is that it seems like throughout the entire film, that the television reception is kind of fuzzy. Everybody's having a problem with their cable. And you see this at the beginning of the movie, and it continues throughout the movie. People don't know what's going on at the TV network. They're trying to figure out the problem. One of the engineers at the TV station, David Levinson, he finds that there's some kind of code embedded in the satellite transmission, and it's like, well, we don't have to worry about it because it's cycling, and every time it cycles, it gets weaker or it gets lesser, and eventually it'll cycle down to nothing. So we'll be fine. We'll get a regular signal that TV signal will return to normal, and it won't be anything to worry about. And then when the aliens come, that's when he gets the idea that it's the aliens that are interfering with the satellite signal. And the reason that the interference is cycling is that the aliens are using it as a countdown. It's on this day that David Levinson has his father drive him from New York City to Washington, D.C. to try to get his wife's attention to this matter so that his wife could notify the president. And in his genius, he's able to figure out how to contact his wife. It's like, because you can't just walk into the White House. So because he knows, like, it's his ex-wife, but because he knows somebody in the White House, he's able to get their attention and able to get access to the White House. It's like, I like how a lot of these things, they kind of displayed the brilliance of some of the characters. So throughout the movie, you understand, or you're impressed by David Levinson's brilliance. And so when he does the things that he does, like especially in the final act of the movie, you buy into it because he's been proving all along that he's the smart dude. So on the first day, the July 2nd chapter, at first the president doesn't want to evacuate the cities. He doesn't want to cause like worldwide panic. At first he wants to tell the people to go home and basically let the government handle it because perhaps the aliens are friendly. But when David, when he finally gets an audience with the president, he's saying that these aliens are preparing to attack. This is a countdown. This is not a good thing. And it's only then when the president orders an evacuation of some of the major cities, Los Angeles, New York City, the District of Columbia. These are the cities that in America that the aliens are hovering over. And they're hovering over cities all around the world. We meet all of the main characters. So we also meet Stephen Miller and his aspirations to be an astronaut. He's a U.S. Marine fighter pilot. And he has a relationship with a stripper. And he doesn't like go forward with this relationship. Like, they are deeply in love with each other. And I love the relationship that he has with Jasmine Dubrow, the exotic dancer, and her little boy. It feels natural. I think they had great on-screen chemistry. He's supposed to be on leave, but obviously with the appearance of an alien spacecraft, he's being called back to work. Jasmine doesn't understand why he has to be called back to work, but they're aliens, right? So yeah, of course he's going to get called back to work. Jasmine also has a dog named Boomer, but Boomer is not harmed during the making of this film. And then there's a scene where Jasmine has a friend who wants to go and greet the aliens. And Jasmine is like clocking out of work early, and she tells her friend, please don't go there with the other people trying to greet the aliens. It doesn't look good. She says she has a bad feeling about this. The girlfriend promises not to go, but then later on you see her on top of the tower that the aliens are hovering over, trying to greet the aliens. In the meantime, Jasmine is trying to get out of the city. She's actually trying to get to the Air Force base where her boyfriend, Stephen Miller, is. he had told her earlier that, just come on to the base. You'll see that it's fine. But then the aliens attack. And this is like one of the most impressive special effects in cinema history. It is fantastic. It kind of reshapes our perception of what an alien invasion could look like. They shoot these giant beams from the middle of the spacecraft, and the beam destroys whatever object that happens to be directly under it. And then it begins a wave of fire and destruction, just tossing cars and people and buildings out the way as it creates a path of destruction, and people are running out of the way, getting away from this fire and destruction. And Jasmine is one of those people who is trying to outrun a ball of fire. One of the things that struck me as kind of ridiculous is that when the aliens are preparing to fire, like when they move over the city, they're motionless. They're just hovering there. And then the middle of the spacecraft begins to move. You can see stuff opening up, and there's this brilliant blue light that's coming out. And everybody that's driving on the street that were actually trying to evacuate, all of a sudden they stop and they get out of their cars. And I guess on some level, some of the people that were stopped, they couldn't move anyway because traffic was so backed up that it was difficult for them to get out. But for the people who could move, they should have been moving. And that happens all too often in traffic today, when we're driving in traffic and there's like an accident on the other side of the road and everybody wants to slow down and look at the accident. Please, people, the accident on the side of the road has nothing to do with you. Just keep driving. You're just slowing down traffic for no reason. And this is exactly what happens in the movie. The traffic, when the alien starts to move and you see, or the doors start to open, you see this brilliant blue light coming down. Everybody wants to stop and look at it instead of keeping moving. They're getting out of their cars. They want to get a better look at what's going on instead of trying to get out of there. And this brilliant light comes out. Then it shoots this beam of pure energy. And you see this building in, I guess it's Los Angeles. Some tall building in Los Angeles gets struck, and it's obliterated. The people that are directly under the spacecraft welcoming it to Earth, they are obliterated, vaporized. And then the building is destroyed, and then there's this diameter of fire starts, and destruction starts spreading from that beginning point throughout Los Angeles, and people are trying to run. They can't drive anymore because nobody wants to drive. So now they're all running away from this wall of flame coming in all different directions. And this is a fantastic effect. It's a fantastic, impressive display of destruction and mayhem. And it's one of the reasons I think that we all love this movie. And I think I mentioned that Jasmine is one of the people that's running away from the destruction. And she grabs some of her things out the car, her child, and they start running. Curiously, the dog doesn't pick up on the clue and just kind of stays in the car. And they're running, and they find an alcove under this tunnel where they try to hide in. And then she starts to call the dog, and then the dog starts running. Amazing that the dog can hear his master, and the dog just barely escapes the wall of fire, it was a cool effect. And as I said, no dog was harmed. So that's a beautiful thing. Mainly you see these destructions in America. This is, for the most of this film, and this is a very American-centric film. Like, you basically imagine all of these things are happening around the world, but you don't see most of the world through much of this movie. It would have been a much longer movie had they included the destructions of different cities worldwide. But mainly in the beginning, they just show New York, Los Angeles, and Washington. And in Washington, D.C., they're trying to evacuate. Even the president is evacuating much too late, just barely getting out of the way of the destruction of the White House. And there are two helicopters leaving. It's Marine One and a similar helicopter to Marine One. And the second helicopter that contains half of his staff is destroyed in the explosion trying to get away from the destruction of the White House. The geography of like how this explosion works, it's kind of funny looking. But because you see that Air Force One barely escapes. But the thing is, Air Force One is at Andrews Air Force Base. They take Marine One, and they don't really tell you where Marine One is going, but Air Force One is usually at Andrews Air Force Base. So presumably that's where it went. And even all the way at Andrews Air Force Base, well, Air Force One barely takes off in time to avoid being destroyed. This would suggest that Andrews, which is about 10 to 15 miles away from the White House, was still in the path of the destruction of this massive fireball. But at the same time, it's a relatively slow-moving fireball, certainly not as fast as a specially equipped helicopter can fly. So we get a sense of the survivability or the chance that people might have had to get out of the way of the path of a fireball. Unfortunately, because the traffic is basically jammed, there's a traffic jam everywhere, the ability of people to get out of the way of the fireball is not good. But all of this fire and destruction and excitement, that's just the first chapter. That's just July 2nd. And then the morning and the next day, and it's the next chapter, July 3rd. July 3rd is the counterattack where the Earth military tries to fight back against the aliens. Actually, I'm not exactly sure if it's really the whole world. We only get to see, as I said, the American response to the aliens. And they sent out their fighter pilots. They sent out a massive squadron of airplanes. I'm imagining that they're sending out the Air Force, the Marines, and the Navy to attack this massive spaceship. But we only really get to see the squadron that Stephen Miller is a part of. So they send out their fighter pilots. They go out, they attack the spaceship. But the spaceship is protected by a force field. And basically the gig is up. So the massive spaceship, they send out their attack fighters. Now, why is it necessary to send out attack fighters? I have to assume at this point it's just for the movie, because the giant spacecraft could have just sat there and done nothing. Or maybe the aliens didn't want to take any chances that the humans would be able to figure out how to penetrate their shielding. So that's probably the only explanation off the top of my dome. Or maybe they just want to frustrate the human fighters or not fully reveal their capabilities. So they want to keep them away from the giant 15-mile in diameter spacecraft. They send out their smaller fighters, comparable to fighter jets. And it's an exciting air battle. One of the most exciting fighting battles that we have in the movies. It's exciting because the fighter pilots, they're basically fighting against overwhelming odds because they don't have any weaponry that can penetrate the shields of these smaller craft. The smaller craft are shielded too. And so the only thing that they can do is try to get away. The president actually orders a withdrawal, a retreat. But it's like, it's a furious battle. There's really nothing that fighter pilots can do, and they're just getting blown up one by one because they don't have any effective weaponry. And in one of those fights, Captain Stephen Miller is being chased by one of the alien fighters. He leads the fighter through the Grand Canyon, and he's flying through all of these rocky formations, trying to avoid this alien fighter who's hot on his tail. And that's one of the most thrilling sequences in the movie. eventually he starts to run low on fuel. So he releases his plane's parachute to blind the alien. Then he ejects his plane. And the alien can't see. So it crashes into the Grand Canyon and lands actually near where Stephen Miller lands. And this is one of the best parts in the movie, one of my favorite parts, where Stephen Miller, he gets out of his ejection seat and he walks off. He walks over to where the alien ship has landed. And when he approaches the ship, either he figures out how to open it, or the ship was opening itself. It's probably opening itself. He sees the alien in the ship, and he punches the alien in the face and says, "Welcome to Earth," and managed to knock the alien out. Presumably the alien was already kind of knocked out. And then later you see him dragging the alien across this, I want to say it's a desert. He's dragging him across the desert. And he gets upset because he's like, "What is that smell?" And he goes on and kicks the alien for smelling so bad. And then he sees a caravan of RVs, just a host of RVs. And they give him a ride to an Air Force base that he happened to see while he was flying over the desert. At this point, they're somewhere in Nevada. It's the same day that the president finds out about Area 51. In this reality, for whatever reason, I guess you could call this the deep state. The deep state does not tell the president about Area 51 for plausible deniability. So when anybody asks the president about Area 51, he could just tell them that it's a fairy tale. And then he learns for the first time during this alien invasion that this Area 51 is real. Now, why the defense secretary doesn't tell the president about the existence of Area 51 when these spacecraft first appear, who knows why? It's the reason why he got fired, that he didn't let the president know from Jump Street about Area 51. Like, he could have told, he waited until like the very last minute to tell the president about this super secret alien facility. So they go there and they see the spaceship that they had captured. They actually see the dead bodies of the alien, and they meet Dr. Brackish Oaken. And when I saw Brackish Oaken, I was like, Data! Because Brett Spiner famously played Data on Star Trek. That's when they start to try to formalize a plan. And they decide to try to use a nuclear weapon. This upsets David Levinson. David Levinson is someone who, he's basically an environmentalist. He believes in like renewable energy and the preservation of the planet. And the use of nuclear weapons will just have a devastating effect on the planet. And the president is reluctant, but after having his mind invaded actually what happens is that Captain Miller makes it over to the Air Force. He makes it to the secret Area 51 Air Force Base. Now they have a live alien, and Dr. Oaken is real excited. So they start to cut open what looks like an alien is really a biosuit. So they cut open the biosuit to reveal the alien inside. And then the alien gets loose and attacks all of the scientists and kills them, but he's able to communicate with the president inside this containment unit. He's communicating with the president telepathically, and the communication itself is painful. But after this, they kill the alien because it seems like the alien is telepathically killing the president. And then after they kill the alien, the president knows that the aliens are there to basically annihilate the life on Earth and take all of Earth's natural resources, and that they've done it to different planets throughout their travels. This is more like a nomadic spacefaring species, and they just go from planet to planet, taking all of that planet's resources. So Earth is the next planet on the list. And it's at this point where the president decides to strike them with nuclear weapons. But it doesn't work. And that's a painful realization. And that was one of the scenes that I really liked, is like how it seemed like it was going to work, but then it doesn't work. They feel like humanity may be lost. Now, this goes to the thought of what might be happening around the world. Like I said, we don't see what's happening worldwide. Like, had other governments tried their nuclear weapons, there are over everywhere the aliens are, like half of the places where they have hovered and destroyed are places where nuclear weapons are available. So it makes you wonder if other governments had tried nuclear weapons. And it would have been interesting if they had included more of a perspective of what else is happening around the world. Because this is such a jingoistic, American-centered movie, it would seem like the rest of the world was just waiting for the Americans to come up with a plan. There's even a comment where a British officer says, well, it's about time they've come up with something. Like, they're just literally waiting out there for America to lead them into battle, which could be problematic. But it was at this point where in our history where I think America was, like in 1996, it was still a beloved country around the world. Like, even our adversaries admired America for the culture and the basic general positive attitude that Americans tend to have. I think it was in this July 3rd chapter that we had this personal moment between David Levinson and his estranged, well, not his estranged wife, his ex-wife, Constance Spano. And this was like, it was personal moments like these in the movie that I really liked. And it was him trying to figure out why their marriage fell apart, why they couldn't work. And it kind of boiled down to David Levinson not being as ambitious as his wife was. So Constance Spano is a White House communications director. She has ambitions for bigger things. Like she's like in the middle of her career. She wants to move on and be an important figure in government. And Levinson is just happy being like a computer engineer or a programmer at a cable network. Even though he's smart enough, like he's brilliant, so he could be working as like a tech entrepreneur or something like that. He could be more ambitious, but he's not. He's satisfied with where he is in life. And apparently that's just not something that Constance could tolerate. That's how their marriage broke up. And in this meeting, she's confounded by his lack of ambition. So she asked him, like, haven't you wanted to be something part of something special? And at this point, he had been drinking, and he had been drinking because of the president's decision to launch a nuclear weapon. And he had been upset about that. And now he's being confronted. He's having this conversation with his wife. And he slams his drink on the table and he says, I thought I was part of something special. Which means that all he needed was to be together with his wife. He was satisfied with his work, and he was having his wife was all he needed to be fulfilled in his life. And that was something that she didn't understand. She didn't understand that a person could be fulfilled just where they were. In her mind, somebody needs to always be striving for something more. And that's just not the person that David was. And I thought that was a very cool personal moment. So all of this happened on July 3rd, and then the evening and the morning, and you have July 4th. It's on the morning of July 4th that David has this plan of writing a computer virus and uploading it to the aliens. It was this computer virus that would take down the shields, and then with the shields disabled, they can attack the spaceship. They can actually damage the spaceships. Since the plan involved them traveling to the mothership in the aliens' own ship that had been captured by Area 51, they would use this capture ship, they would go to the mothership, and then they would attach a tactical nuke to this ship and basically attack the ship from the inside, escape the ship. The mothership would explode, and the humanity would win the day. That was the plan. But the plan doesn't, like most plans, it doesn't go as perfectly as one would hope. Like, one of the things that I thought was amusing was Stephen Miller volunteered to fly the spaceship. He gets into the spaceship and he tries to push the spaceship forward, but instead flies backward into a wall. And he's like, oops. And David is inside the spaceship. He's the only person that can fix the computer program if something goes wrong. So he's the passenger. And David's like, oops, what do you mean, oops? There is a lot of great chemistry between Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum. And then when they get inside the mothership, like, Will Smith is flying the whole time, and next thing you know, he loses control of the ship, and the aliens had taken control of the ship, remote controlling the ship to a destination. And, you know, Stephen Miller was like, whoa, what's going on? And that's when David was like, don't worry. I was counting on this happening. I knew this is something that might happen. And Miller was like, when were you going to tell me? When were you going to tell me that they might take control of the ship? And that's when David said, whoops. So it's a callback to the earlier whoops. And I like the jokes that they use in this movie, the callbacks, the joy that this movie brings. And it was really cool. So one of the main plot holes, or I should say, quote unquote plot holes, that people point out in this movie is that David is able to upload a computer virus to the alien ship. It's a human program. So how can a program developed by humans, like Windows OS or whatever programming language, Linus, whatever programming language, because programming is a language, and you just can't have one computer program communicate with another computer program. Like, you can't even really do that on Earth. How could you possibly do that to an alien spacecraft? We've all had computer problems before where computers are not compatible, or like you're trying to download an app, but it's not, the app works for a while, then it stops working because they updated your phone to the point where the app doesn't work anymore. That's because you have programming that doesn't communicate anymore, and so it doesn't work. And so how can a program developed on Earth use a program or invade a program that's developed by aliens? And that's a huge plot hole. It's not something that anybody thinks about until after they leave the theater. But one thing that we might consider, well, actually, there are two things. The first thing is that there is the spacecraft that was on Earth since 1947. So theoretically, they might have been able to decipher the alien programming language, or they might have used that programming language that they found on the alien spacecraft to help them create the programming languages that were being used on Earth. They probably used some of that alien technology to develop some of Earth's technology. That's one of the things. The other thing that we could consider is that when the aliens first invade Earth, before the Earthlings knew that the Earth was being invaded by aliens, the aliens would communicate each other by basically hijacking our satellites. They hid a programming code in the code of the satellites so that they could communicate with each other around the world, because the Earth is kind of an obstacle for radio signals. So they would use Earth satellites to bounce the signals off of the satellites in order to communicate with each other. Well, perhaps what the aliens did was they knew what the human programming language is, and they adapted their network to communicate with human programming so that their ships can communicate with each other. And that adaptation of their technology to human technology made their systems vulnerable to communicate with human technology. That's another thing that I think should be considered when discussing this so-called plot hole. In any case, there is an argument that can be made that there had been enough time to develop an understanding of how the alien programming language worked, enough for David to develop a simple computer virus to upload into the alien computer and then cause their shield to shut down, giving the humans a chance to fight the giant spacecraft, which is not as effective as you might think, because in their first assault, they used up a lot of missiles, and then the aliens destroyed a lot of military bases. So now the humans are low on missiles, and they basically accidentally discovered a way of absolutely destroying the spacecraft, where they just shoot a missile into their city destroying, devastating beam. Just before the beam is released, they can shoot a missile and destroy it, or not being able to shoot a missile, perhaps jamming an entire airplane into that part, taking down the alien spacecraft. And it's on July 4th, when they're doing this battle, when they start to show other parts of the world, and somehow all across the world, everybody is successful at taking down their spaceships. Like, everybody is able to follow these instructions. And that's one thing that they don't actually cover in the film. That could be, like, at this point in the film, you're feeling so good that you don't care. You're just glad the aliens were defeated. But it seems to me that either some of the aliens should have escaped and they should have shown that, or sometimes that tactic didn't work. Like, either the aliens never tried to fire their weapon, or the aliens successfully fired their weapons and defeated the humans in, say, France or Belgium or wherever that particular alien was at. It seems like a huge coincidence that everybody around the world was able to defeat their particular alien threat. It also seems unrealistic that, well, they can train enough pilots to fly military-grade planes in a few hours, like advanced fighter jets, like being able to train a crop duster or a commercial airline pilot to fly in advanced fighter jets and be familiar with their systems and to be able to communicate and understand the communication systems, to be able to do all that in just a few hours to fight off aliens. So that's probably more far-fetched than being able to upload a computer virus. But as I said, by the time you get to this point in the movie, by the time you get to the ending battle and humanity is victorious, you feel too good to worry about such details. So those are the things that I really loved about the movie. And I feel a whole bunch of nostalgia about this movie, and I don't worry about the details. This is one of those movies that I can just watch and have a good time. And now that we've talked about our favorite parts, let's get into the trivia top 10 provided by IMDb. According to producer and co-writer Dean Delvin, the United States military had agreed to support the film by allowing the crew to film at military bases, consulting the actors who have military roles, etc. However, after learning of the Area 51 references in the script, they withdrew their support. Which is kind of ridiculous, because if you're going to maintain that Area 51 is a secret or that it doesn't exist, then you shouldn't freak out when a movie about aliens invading Earth is going to reference and talk about Area 51. I mean, the best thing to do is to be cool about it and to pretend that it's just all part of their little movie script and it doesn't have anything to do with you. But the minute you start acting weird about the mention of Area 51, people are going to suspect that it's a real place and that you're trying to protect it. The scene in which Will Smith drags the unconscious alien across the desert was filmed on the salt flats near Great Salt Lake in Utah. Smith's line, "And what the hell is that smell?" was unscripted. Great Salt Lake is home to tiny crustaceans called brine shrimp. When they die, their bodies sink to the bottom of the lake, which isn't very deep, and decompose. When the wind kicks up just right, the bottom mud is disturbed, and the smell of millions of decaying brine shrimp can be very, very bad. Apparently, nobody warned Will. And that is a smell that I can't even imagine. Independence Day holds the record for the most miniature model work to appear in one film. Model shop supervisor Michael Joyce estimated that more miniatures were used for this film than any other two films combined. Due to the advances in digital technology since the film's release, most experts believe this record may stand forever. And this is obviously to the advancement in CGI. When doing CGI on buildings or planes or space shuttles or things like that, they look absolutely real. Yeah, you really can't tell the difference between reality and fiction. But the work that model makers used to do was exemplary. Director Roland Emmerich was notified one day that Robert Loggia was very upset and refusing to leave his trailer. Several days earlier, producer Dean Delvin accidentally suggested to Loggia that Loggia watch Airplane from 1980 for inspiration, when Delvin actually intended to suggest Airport from 1970. Not familiar with either film, Loggia rented Airplane, and after watching it, thought he had unknowingly been participating in the production of a spoof movie. And he may not have had any problems with a spoof movie, but that's not what he signed up for. That's not what he was sold on. So I can understand him being very upset, especially after watching Airplane, which is kind of a spoof of Airport, at least in parts. And I can see why they wanted Loggia to watch Airport, because that's a disaster movie. And Independence Day shares some DNA with disaster movies. The president's speech was filmed on August 6, 1995, in front of an old airplane hangar that once housed the Enola Gay, which dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima exactly 50 years earlier on August 6, 1945. Interestingly, the crowd was not scripted to start cheering. Bill Pullman's delivery of the speech was so good that they just started applauding and cheering on their own, and the filmmakers kept it in the movie. And it's really great when something like that happens and you get an organic response from such a stellar performance. Production designer Patrick Tatopoulos presented Roland Emmerich with two concepts for the aliens. Emmerich liked both designs so much, he came up with the idea to use one design as the actual alien and the other to be a biomechanical suit the aliens could wear. Both Tatopoulos concepts appear in the film. And that was spectacular. I really like that concept. Because when you first see the aliens, you see them in one form. Then you see them in a different form. and you realize that it's just a suit that they're wearing, and I thought that was fantastic. In the briefing room scene at Area 51, behind Hiller and Gray, there is a night vision pan of the base. What you are seeing are actual shots of the Area 51 taken by a conspiracy theorist from a place called Freedom Ridge. The ridge was commandeered by the U.S. government in the late 90s and is no longer accessible to the public, which is interesting because it would seem that maybe the government saw Independence Day and realized that they had an illicit shot of Area 51 and found Freedom Ridge and decided to shut it down. According to the liner notes from the La La Land Records limited edition of the complete score by David Arnold, the drum rhythm heard during the invasion scene near the beginning of the film are Morse code letters DEI. And that is a deep cut. No pun intended. On the Bonneville Salt Flats, cast and crew wearing long pants still managed to get sunburns on their legs. The white, salty surface reflected the sunlight up their pant legs. And that is fascinating. I'm thinking back to all the times I had been warned against sunburns, even though my skin is rather dark and I don't believe that I could get sunburns. I was always told, or people tried to convince me that I could still get it. And so I'd always be advised to either put on suntan lotion or to wear long clothes. And it's funny how sometimes it doesn't work. The White House, which exploded, was built at 1/12 scale just to be blown up, although it was also used in one other shot when David and Julia stopped the car in front of the White House. 9 cameras filmed the explosion at various speeds, one of which was 12 times faster than normal, then played back at normal speed to make the explosion seem bigger and slower on film. This scene appeared prominently in most teasers, trailers, and TV spots, and is widely regarded as the film's most iconic shot. It even appeared on the cover of most VHS editions of the film. So those were fascinating bits of trivia, and there's a lot more trivia on IMDb that this film has. There are some films that don't have a lot of trivia, but this film in particular had tons of trivia, and it's all very interesting. Did you learn anything? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Write me an email. Do your thing. And now that we've talked about the trivia, let's see what the critics thought. The critics have it at 77%, and the audience score is 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb Reviews has it at 7 out of 10. So pretty much everybody is in agreement on how they feel about this film. Michael H. Price from Fort Worth Star-Telegram/DFW wrote, "It is a boldly enacted, every dollar on the screen production that allows moviegoers to either check their brains at the door or wallow in excitement or to relish the spectacle of how people we all know might face up to an invasion from a hostile planet." And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I endorse this statement. I feel like he's expressing my own feelings about this movie. Joanna Connors from Cleveland Plain Dealer wrote, "The narrative is, aliens attack world. World fights back. You'll never guess what happens at the end." And this is ridiculously reductive and unnecessarily so. There are a lot of things in this movie that make this movie worth watching, and it's really skipping over everything. The music, the special effects, the character interactions, the character development, the character arcs. None of these things are expressed in this reducted review. And you can do this type of reduction to any film like this. 2 sisters play pro baseball. See, that's a league of their own. But nobody would ever describe a league of their own like that. It's too much of a good movie to reduce it to a soundbite. Tom Long from Santa Cruz Cynical wrote, "A mesmerizing mix of epic entertainment, dependable stock characters, and primal paranoia, Independence Day is sure to become the grand science fiction film of the 90s. In fact, it may end up being the downright biggest film of the decade. And I'd have to say it's definitely up there. At last, we have the critic Jim Skembry from The Age, Australia, and he writes, "This may come as a bit of a shock, given all the hype, but the uncomfortable truth is that a great deal of Independence Day is actually quite boring." And I'm going to tell you, I don't get this. I don't get this comment. There are a lot of things that you can say about Independence Day, but one thing you're not going to do is call it boring. Finally, Independence Day is, as of this recording, available on wherever you buy physical media or digital copies. As it happens, it was on sale at Amazon or Fandango for $5. At least the digital copies were. And that was probably a 4th of July sale. So I don't know if it's still up there. By the time you hear this, it'll be after the 4th of July. The next film we check out will be a complete 180 degrees from what I've been talking about recently. There's no high-pitched action, no campy, goofy moments to laugh at, and it's certainly not a light popcorn romp that you can turn your brains off to. The next film we talk about will be a thinking person's drama. Please join me next time as we talk about Glengarry Glen Ross. You can follow us on Blue Sky Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter at Backlook Cinema. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at friends@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be empathetic, be kind, be helpful, and be outstanding.